conducted in two parts. The first is open to the public. When business is concluded, the live stream and recording will cease so that council can deal with several confidential and sensitive matters in closed meeting. I would now like to formally open the meeting and introduce each alderman and ask them to confirm their attendance. Deputy Mayor, Alderman Heather Chong.
Yes, present.
Alderman Blomley.
Present.
Alderman Edmonds.
Yes, I'm here, present.
Alderman Newington.
Yes, Doug, I'm here. I'm here, sorry.
Alderman James.
Present.
Alderman Kennedy.
Present.
Alderman Mulder.
Online.
Alderman Pears.
Present, Mayor.
Alderman Von Berto.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Present.
Alderman Walker.
Present, Your Worship.
And Alderman Warren.
Yes, present.
Thank you all. We have 100% attendance, so there are no apologies. I'd now like to move through each of the start items before voting and give Alderman an opportunity to comment or ask questions. First of all, the confirmation of minutes. Is anyone got any matters to raise on the previous minutes for the 16th of March? Secondly, the second start item is that council notes the workshops conducted on the 23rd and 30th of March.
Yes, Alderman James, I would like that unstarred, please, Mr. Mayor, because there is a matter that wasn't included as at that workshop meeting of last Monday. Thanks.
Okay, you have an opportunity to deal with that now if you like, and we can keep it as part of the omnibus motion.
Well, there's a number of questions that I would like to raise, and also probably I should start with the General Manager. At the workshop last Monday, the public pier and breakwater was discussed. You, Mr. Mayor, to probably the General Manager, the Bellerive Yacht Club extension to its marina, is that dependent upon council building the public pier and breakwater?
Thank you, Alderman James. The short answer is yes. The BYC development relies on the breakwater component of the Bellerive pier to provide protection to the larger marina development.
And whilst we're dealing with, excuse me, the Bellerive Yacht Club, has the Bellerive Yacht Club made or will be making a financial contribution to the construction of the public pier and breakwater?
No, they won't.
Thirdly, Council passed a motion recently regarding a trial ferry service between Bellerive and the Western Shore. On completion, that is of the public pier and breakwater, is the pier structurally sound for as a ferry terminal as part of what may be the Derwent ferries from Bellerive to the Western Shore or Western Shore to Bellerive?
The pier hasn't been designed to facilitate a ferry service. There's no reason why it couldn't be further upgraded, but at this point in time, it's not designed for that purpose.
And finally, Mr. General Manager, what is the total estimate of costs for the construction of the public pier and breakwater?
I'm not sure I can answer that at this point in time, given that that's the subject of the closed meeting agenda item tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions on the workshops? Tabling of petitions, I understand, General Manager, you have one?
I have one petition. It's a petition with 44 signatories requesting council to replace a large eucalypt tree on council land outside 15 Hill Street. with a more suitable species, and it's, as I said, a complying petition.
Thank you. Any other? Well, I guess we can't do it online, so we'll take that as the petition that's been tabled.
Yes, please.
In terms of reports from outside bodies, the Copying Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority, Alderman James Walker, if you've got anything there.
It's as concise as the minute suggests, so not a lot to report.
Thank you very much. Under Tasmanian Water Corporation, we held an extraordinary owners representative group meeting by teleconference on the 23rd of March, and I would like to table a letter from the chief owners representative detailing the outcomes of that meeting. That'll be available with the minutes when they're circulated.
Mr. Mayor,
Sure.
on that, was there any key matters that would be of interest not only to the elected reps but also to the public, sort of in a dot form or a summary form, which may be of interest to the community?
There are a number of points which I will, which will be clear when they're attached to the minutes, Alderman James. I won't go through them now unless you specifically want me to.
I just thought there may be a...
I think there's one key matter I could bring up, and that the Board of TasWater is endeavouring to do its best in terms of maintaining the essential services of water and sewage for the population of Tasmania, of course. They've adopted a number of means of assisting small businesses and people who might be struggling financially. As a consequence of that, there may be some threat to the dividends that come to councils, and TasWater is doing its best to ensure that any impact in terms of dividends is minimised.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
In terms of the Greater Hobart Committee, we held a meeting on the 17th of March, and I'll table the agreed action items there, and that'll also be available in the minutes. Now we move on to item 10.2, another start item, reports from council and special committees and other representative bodies. In that regard, I'd like to table an LGAT general meeting minutes for the 27th of March. Are there any other committees or representative bodies with to be tabled? Okay, and finally, determination on petitions at previous council meetings, General Manager. I think that it's actually been subsumed by a motion on notice. Is that correct? You need to unmute, General Manager.
Sorry, thank you. It's been subsumed by the notice of motion from Alderman Blomley at 9.1.
Can I just ask a question, Mr. Mayor, in relation to this? Mr. General Manager, isn't it normal practice or the course of procedure that once a petition is tabled, then within 42 days, the officer or responsible officer would provide a report to council, and that is what we have normally achieved as part of our process. How different is it in this instance where it has been incorporated, it would seem, as part of the notice of motion, when in fact the council officer hasn't actually produced that report to the council?
Thank you for the question, Alderman James. Our normal approach is, as you have summarised, to provide a report to council within the 42 days for the council to consider the petition. The relevant section of the Act, which off the top of my head I think is section 59, requires that council consider the petition and determine it within 42 days. So there's no requirement for a report from officers, just simply that the council determines its position on the petition within that 42-day period. And in the circumstances of receiving the notice of motion, it was my view that we could satisfy the Act requirements through my comments on the petition in terms of the General Manager's advice. So that's the approach that we've taken on this occasion.
And just on that, Mr Mayor, it would appear that the council's traffic engineer was to provide a report to council on the 27th of April in relation to this petition. And in that there was a number of references that the report would include a consultant. The council in the meantime was going to engage a traffic consultant, and also there was a possibility of preparing a concept design. All of that had been conveyed to a couple of residents, and that I would have thought should have come out when the council officer was going to prepare his report and present it to council on the 27th of April. It just seems a little bit different to what the practice has been in my number of years on council. It's always been that time lag for those experts to prepare a report and provide it to council.
You got any further to add, General Manager?
I don't think so. Essentially, my view was that the notice of motion treads the same ground in terms of what we would have recommended broadly to council to do at any rate. So we're trying to avoid the absurdity of dealing with a notice of motion only to have to re-deal again later in the agenda with a report on a petition that had then been already determined. So my approach was to simply bring the two together as under the notice of motion, quite simply because that would appear in the agenda before the normal report would have.
Are there any other questions on the petition? In that case, I'll call for a motion, an omnibus motion to confirm, to move the recommendation for each of those start items, please.
Moved, Mayor.
Sorry, who was that? Alderman Pears, seconder?
I'll second that.
Seconded, Kennedy.
Alderman Kennedy, thank you. Given that we've had the discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And
remember, you're voting in the chat column, Mayor.
In the show.
Through you, Mr Mayor, have we actually covered 11.1, the weekly briefing reports?
I haven't. I'll have to come back to that. I've overlooked that. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That's a unanimous decision, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Moving on now to item 3, the Mayor's communication. I will be tabling, or I have tabled a list of relevant meetings and events. I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Alderman Chong on behalf of Council for her award at the Tasplan International Women's Day Awards for Excellence in 2020. Alderman Chong was announced as the winner of the Local Government Inspirational Leader Award last month for more than 10 years of significant service and leadership in the Clarence community. First elected to the Clarence Council in 2009, she was elected Deputy Mayor in 2018. Alderman Chong was the first female chair of the National Summer Fruit Australia and has won both the Telstra Tasmanian Businesswoman of the Year and the Tasmanian Rural Woman of the Year. She's also a long-term member of ALGWA, supporting women in local government through mentoring sessions and encouraging women to stand for election through the Women Can program. Congratulations, Heather.
Thank you.
I'd like to move now to, item 7, public question time. Public questions on notice and answers to public questions on notice. General Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one question on notice from Mr. Thomas Chick of Mornington. Mr. Chick asks, in what way will COVID-19 affect the way council meetings work? If a public gallery is not feasible, as I suspect, will meetings be streamed? Will aldermen be teleconferencing in? What other changes will occur that I have not addressed? The answer to the question is that since the Tasmanian government has introduced its COVID-19 emergency legislation and has issued notices to council detailing new, more flexible arrangements for meetings, elected members will now teleconference to participate in council meetings. Council will also live stream and record those meetings for the public. In respect to questions on notice and deputations, the arrangements that we've put in place are for those questions and deputations to be received in writing, and they will be read out at the meeting and responded to accordingly.
Thank you. There is no matters to deal with at 7.3 and 7.4 is not possible under current meeting procedures. Deputations by members of the public, General Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We have two deputations, and as advised a moment ago, I'll read those out in order. The first deputation is from Ms. Sophie Harris in respect to the Bellerive Village pedestrian safety measures, which is the topic of the notice of motion tonight. Ms. Harris writes as follows. To whom it may concern, my name is Sophie Harris and I am the owner of Cabbage's Flower Shop located on the corner of Cambridge Road and Percy Street in Bellerive. I'm also a resident of Bellerive, living close by to my business. I make this statement as a concerned member of the community regarding the safety of pedestrians in the Bellerive Village area. The village shopping precinct is home to a large number of services and businesses, which has in the last few years increased both traffic and pedestrians in the area. These include several medical practices, pharmacy, newsagent, post office, bakery, florist and gift shops, gyms, restaurants and coffee shops. The proximity of the Cottage School, Bellerive Primary and Corpus Christi, as well as the dance school, also mean a large number of children are in the area. The convenience of these businesses in the one area means a lot of people visit us for their errands. It is also the main thoroughfare to the Bellerive Bluff area, so traffic rates in the area are high, particularly at the T intersection of Cambridge Road and Percy Street. As a result, these large numbers of traffic and pedestrians are often at competition with each other. I've witnessed many people of all ages, but particularly the elderly, having to quickly race approaching cars in an effort to get across the road, even with the existing islands on Cambridge Road. Several of these have resulted in people tripping over and being taken into the pharmacy or doctor for medical attention. Of serious concern is the area in front of the car parks in Percy Street. Many attempt to cross here to access the major businesses housed in the key building or the bakery and other services on the other side. Cars race around the corner, often as pedestrians are trying to cross when there is a small gap in the traffic. I've had many of my suppliers and customers commenting on how flustered they were after trying to cross. We took signatures for the petition for just 3 weeks without having to approach anyone to participate. Each signature in front of you was provided by people making a concerted effort to come in to sign, having heard through minimal promotion. I encourage Council to consider giving pedestrians priority of way in the area in an effort to slow traffic and avoid any further incidents, and also to encourage more shoppers to the area, which would also support our businesses. Thank you for your consideration. Kind regards, Sophie Harris. The second deputation is from Mr. Michael Geard of Cambridge Road in Bellerive. Mr. Geard writes, this motion addresses the concerns many Bellerive residents have with regard to traffic management and pedestrian safety in the Bellerive Village precinct. My own concerns commenced when on the 19th of March 2019, I wrote to State Growth, Tasmania Police and Clarence Council in regard to the traffic signals on the corner of Cambridge Road and Clarence Street, Bellerive. My reason for writing to these organisations was because I was nearly run over twice in one day due to inattentive drivers failing to stop at the red arrows, brackets 3 arrows, located on the north side of Cambridge Road turning into Clarence Street, which come on when a pedestrian wants to cross the road to go into Bellerive Village. As there was no action to my first email, I wrote again on the 22nd of May last year after 2 further incidents took place. An officer from Clarence Council contacted me by phone to request a meeting at the intersection in late May, early June last year. A number of changes were discussed. However, after 2 further incidents recently, and as there had not been any improvements, I wrote again to Council on the 23rd of March last. This last email seems to indicate the issue has now been put forward as part of next year's financial capital works projects, with Council expecting to finalise its budget by June 2020, and the Council officer has undertaken to provide an update to me on this specific project once Council has finalised its budget process. Fortunately, because of my sporting activities, I'm physically active and agile and therefore have been able to avoid a possible tragedy on each of these many occasions, and more I have not reported. I support any reasonable action being taken to improve both this intersection and other problem areas in the village. Michael Geard.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9, motions on notice, 9.1, Alderman Blomley. And do we have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Von Berto. Alderman Blomley?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As colleagues will recall, in October last year, this council supported a motion to investigate pedestrian safety on Lincoln Street, Lindisfarne, and it's pleasing to see that matter is progressing. Tonight's motion, in large part, has its genesis in that October motion, and like the Lindisfarne motion, this is community activism at its finest. As we heard earlier this evening, outlined in the deputations from Ms Sophie Harris and Mr Michael Geard, there is a similar and significant concern for pedestrian safety in and around the Bellerive Village precinct as that expressed also in Lindisfarne. As outlined in Ms Harris's deputation and as tabled at our last council meeting, in a space of 3 weeks, a petition calling on council to review the current traffic management and pedestrian safety arrangements in the Bellerive Village retail commercial precinct garnered 279 signatories. The high level of community and business support of this petition demonstrates the heightened community concern surrounding the danger posed to pedestrians, mainly elderly residents, as they attempt to cross roads in the Bellerive Village shopping precinct. In talking with residents and business operators in the area, there is a discernible groundswell of community support for council to undertake a strategic review of the current traffic flow and pedestrian interactions in and around Bellerive Village, particularly in light of the significant development slated to occur in this area and the surrounding Kangaroo Bay. Mr Mayor, I would like to place on the record my thanks to Ms Harris and her wonderful team at Cabbage's Flower Shop for initiating and driving this petition. It is through their proactive efforts that tonight we have the opportunity to appropriately address this issue and in many ways future-proof Bellerive Village, making it a safe and desirable destination for all. In addition, if I may just pick up on an answer to a question asked at our last council meeting by Alderman Walker regarding the master planning process for the Victoria Esplanade area, in my view, it is opportune and eminently sensible to incorporate a strategic review of traffic flow and pedestrian safety interactions in and around Bellerive Village in this body of work. Mr Mayor, I commend the motion and seek the support of colleagues.
Thank you. Alderman Von Berto.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't think there's a great deal to add. The aspect that is important, that is in Part B and also in Part C, is the strategic review, and Alderman Blomley has covered that very clearly and looked at it holistically across the Bellerive district. So I think that's the important aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Yes, I'd like to speak, please. Beth here.
Alderman Warren.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate and I support this in principle. I do wonder about the timing of bringing this motion tonight when we seem to have solved the problems a different way by complete lack of traffic and low closing of all the businesses. But I also note that a very regular attendant at Clarence Council meetings, Joanne Marsh, did raise this topic in a letter to Alderman, that there are a number of black spots around Clarence. And I would like to, I guess my question or my comment is that we should be prioritising and taking a strategic approach to all of those. And perhaps this is a good time to do this while there isn't much traffic around, but by the same token, it's difficult to do the modelling when there isn't much traffic around. So I would ask Alderman Blomley to perhaps address in his closing remarks as to how he sees this being implemented at this time when we're in a very strange and unprecedented situation regarding traffic or lack thereof. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Warren. Other speakers?
Doug, Dean here.
Alderman Newington.
Yeah, look, certainly, I mean, look, I'm in favour of anything that works towards calming traffic in high pedestrian volume areas, and certainly Bellerive Village is one of those. Although I do find that, you know, everyone thinks that their area is the one that's got the most traffic and the biggest hoons and the most problems and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, look, I don't want to downplay Bellerive specifically because I know it does have some issues down there. But the bigger issue I see in this situation and this motion in general is the need to look at this in a far bigger, you know, I know it was sort of addressed in relation to the whole area, in relation to, you know, the impacts of the hotel, the impacts of the changes of the yacht club with the new marina in terms of the ferries. And I seriously think we need to also be looking at how we reinvigorate Bellerive in relation to how it works, you know, moving forward with all those changes that are going to be happening over the next few years. So, to be honest, it's probably a little bit premature to look at it in isolation if we're just looking at the traffic without considering all those other things. The timing, I agree with Beth to a certain extent. We've sort of calmed the traffic in a way we didn't really want to see happen, but and it's going to be difficult to sort of look at all these issues. But, you know, moving forward, I certainly think taking this and looking at it at a bigger level in relation to how the other, you know, changes that might occur with these other developments are going to affect it. And like I said, anything that we can do to encourage pedestrian cycling and get cars, you know, to a minimum in these high density areas, I'd certainly support. So, you know, the proof is in the pudding. The next, you know, we've got some other bigger issues to deal with in the coming weeks and months, but it's certainly something I support, you know, looking at as a part of that bigger side of things as well.
Thanks, Alderman Newington. Other speakers?
John Pearce, Doug.
Alderman Pearce.
Thank you. I was going to raise similar questions. I was going to second the motion, but I had my mute button on, so it made it impossible. But look, I support the motion because about 10 years ago, from the same place, from the forest, when the Revolts had it, I met with them and they wanted like a small roundabout on that corner, which, talking to our officers, it was just too narrow. But I think anything we can do, because the letter that Alderman Blomley just read out from Sophie Harris, seeing all the business that have grown in Bellerive is just amazing. And I really think that, you know, we need to have a good look at that. I do also agree with Alderman Warren and Alderman Newington. The time is certainly not perfect, that's for sure. But I think we can do some preliminary work, that's for sure, and get on with it and make the place a lot safer.
Thanks, Alderman Pearce. Other speakers?
Alderman James, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Alderman James.
Look, as I mentioned earlier in the early part of the debate, there has been some correspondence between an elector and also council's traffic engineer. And in that communication to the elector, it said, amongst other things, and I quote, "A petition has been tabled at the last council meeting regarding pedestrian crossings and facilities in the Bellerive village to prepare a report back to council, most likely at the meeting of the 27th of the 4th, 2000. And he goes on to say, no doubt the intersection of Clarence, Cambridge Road will be part of the investigation, unquote. Also, in his last paragraph to the elector, he says, and I quote, "We had engaged a traffic consultant to investigate possible improvements, options, and prepare a concept design," unquote. And this is the information that's being conveyed to the elector and to his residents, neighbouring residents. And that is why I raised the question earlier, why don't we wait until we get the experts to provide this report, particularly in relation to improvements and also a concept plan from a consultant to investigate these very, very important problems that a lot of those residents that signed the petition have brought to our notice. I cannot understand why we need to wait. Well, obviously why we need to wait in order to be able to have the expert opinion and of those persons that would provide us with ways and possible improvements and a concept design, not only for that intersection of Clarence and Cambridge Road, but more importantly for the greater area within the Bellerive village. I am in favour of Part A. Obviously, that was part and parcel of what the petition incorporated and what has brought this matter, only partially, in my opinion, to the officers concerned, council officers concerned. But I'm not in favour of Part B at this stage until we have a council report, as has been indicated, that would be presented to council at the meeting of the 27th of April. It's in my opinion that we're putting the cart before the horse, and why don't we wait until such time as we have this officer's report and the expert traffic consultant and also the possibility of a concept design for the area in our hands, produced at a council workshop, and then we can then look at it and take it further. For that reason, I will not support the motion in its entirety. I would support Part A and Part C, Part A, but I feel that at this time it's premature and there isn't enough time for the officers or the experts, as we rely upon, most and foremost, Mr Mayor, for them to provide us a report on the 27th of April.
Thanks very much, Alderman James. Other speakers?
Yes, Mr Mayor, Alderman Kennedy here. The one thing I'd like to, I've listened to everyone's comments here, and the 3 points that I pull out is review. Are we in a hurry to do this? Our world, as I keep going on about, is changing every day. Is there a hurry to do this? It's talking about a review that can be part of the bigger picture of what Alderman James, Alderman Newington, Alderman Warren have also touched on before. I support a review.
Thank you. Other speakers?
Yeah, I wasn't planning on speaking, but just quickly, you know, I think when we're going to approve developments of this like that we have, then, you know, it's the surrounding areas that need improving. And I think we talked about this with Rosny Hill, and Alderman Pearce and I have been particularly talking about it in terms of traffic flow around that area. I think this sort of falls into the same boat. We're not voting to get the checkbook out tonight. You know, this is the second or third of many steps along the way, and we all know nothing happens fast in local government, and we can discuss funding priorities, etc., particularly in light of current circumstances as we go. But I think the main point for me is that community petitions trigger action. if we don't act on the petition of this many people in our city, then what's the point of them? And I think it undermines the whole process. If we're going to walk around with a petition that creates no action, then they really are just data mining exercises, aren't they? So it's got my support because it's got community support. How quickly things happen, that's all part of the usual processes, isn't it?
Thanks, Alderman Edmonds. Any other speakers?
Alderman Mulder.
Thanks, Alderman Mulder.
I'd just like to compliment the mover of the motion. He's proving to be a very pedestrian alderman.
Thank you, Alderman Mulder. Any other speakers? In that case,
yes, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Walker, it is.
Thank you. Look, I think if this motion had come before us in, say 2-3 months ago or late last year, the discussion would have been less and it would have just gone along. I think the process of the petition is all very sound, although having reports, probably nicer when you're voting on such matters. I guess through you to the relevant officer, and I suspect it will be Mr. Graham, given the current business climate where some of the shops are no longer trading, where the busy medical practices are using teleconferencing wherever possible, given the abnormal flow of traffic that will be experienced, how are the officers intending and what sort of timelines were they thinking of doing the review to get the most optimal and useful result? I would like to hear my concerns assuaged around us doing activity now and coming up with a substandard thing to deal with a low volume abnormal traffic situation.
Mr. Graham.
Thank you for your question, Alderman James. In the current situation, we'll be unable to do surveys, considering, I'm sure, the reduced traffic and parking in the area. So the consultants will be seeking from us in terms of what current data or historical data we have in terms of them undertaking their investigation. And I'd have to do further research with our traffic engineer to advise us what current data we actually have in relation to this. In terms of time frame, my estimate would be it will take us a couple of months potentially to get information back from the consultant, depending upon their current workload. We understand consultants are still busy at present, but I can certainly come back to the Alderman after we've heard back from the consultant as to what time frame we're talking about in relation to this.
Yeah, a further question. So what you're describing sounds more like a literature review or a desktop analysis based on literature provided rather than the standard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the standard procedure in this situation is actually to have people on the streets filming with, monitoring, surveying.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, but it's more a case if we want speed data to understand what the traffic numbers are and what speed the actual vehicles are travelling. We have the parking surveys which have been undertaken every several years, so we have that information. But to actually get traffic speed data, we have to go back to what historical records we actually hold, and I'd need to advise further on that.
Sorry to keep questioning, Mr. Mayor, but it really is helping my decision-making process. Would this be more optimally achieved by undertaking the fundamental safety components that Engineer Gopal, etc., have undertaken, but actually holding off these measures until holding off the surveying and analysis until a more regular pattern re-establishes?
Look, I think you're drawing a comment from an officer here. Can I leave that to Alderman Blomley to answer in his right of reply, please?
You're the Mayor.
Thank you. Well, I think Alderman Blomley, right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for most of your contributions tonight. Can I say that the first point that I'd like to make is that the review clearly won't come to a workshop in the immediate future. It'll be factored into the workload related to the current situation. And I'll also just point out that in October, we, from memory, unanimously passed the Lindisfarne motion. And 6 months later, we're yet to have that report, although we had a preliminary advice, but we yet to have that full report presented to Aldermen at a workshop. So these things won't happen overnight, and as one of the previous speakers said, disappointingly at times, the wheels of local government do move very slowly. But this is, in my view, as I said, an opportune time to move, particularly when there is state government stimulus funding slushing around, looking for somewhere to go in local government. And of course, the parameters for those projects were actually extended, I think, from memory yesterday by the Premier's announcement. So we do have and will have Kangaroo Bay and the hotel coming online. The Bellerive Yacht Club is planning to expand very soon. I do hope there will be ferry terminals. I do hope there's a night economy in the Bellerive Village precinct. But more importantly, I hope that we are able to play our role to ensure that pedestrians and motorists, one and all, are safe in that part of Clarence. So I thank colleagues for their contributions and the consideration, and seek their support.
Okay, so voting's open for the motion on notice from Alderman Blomley. Are we travelling there, General Manager?
You need to unmute your mic, General Manager.
Sorry, thank you. That was carried 11 votes in favour, 1 against.
So the motion is carried. Moving on to...
my count of that's a 10-2, isn't it?
10-2.
Mr Mayor, or Mr General Manager, Alderman James, I voted no.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't see Alderman Warren's against.
Yes, I think there were two against, Mr GM.
That's correct.
Okay, if in voting, could you make it yes, no or abstain to make it simpler to count on the fly, please? Okay, the next item of business is a start item that I missed before, weekly briefing reports, that the information contained in the weekly briefing reports of the 16th, 23rd and 30th of March be noted. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Bomberto. Seconder?
Yep.
Thanks, Alderman Walker. Any questions or discussion? In that case, I'll put voting's open. How are we travelling, General Manager? Have you muted your button again?
No, sorry, I'm just trying to count. Someone said 11-1. Oh, sorry. Yes, it's unanimous. Sorry, Alderman Edmonds confused me somewhat.
Thank you. So the motion is carried.
Well, just for clarity, were we voting on 11.1 then or 11.2?
11.1.
Sorry, I said it was 11.2.
Probably for the sake of how remote this meeting is, we might need to clarify that.
Thanks, Alderman Edmonds. Quite right. Okay, now moving on to planning items, and I advise that Council intends to sit as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act. The first item is 11.3.1, a development application at 16 Yachtsman Way, Tranmere, for a dwelling and ancillary dwelling. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move it, Doug.
And I'll second, Doug.
So Alderman Edmonds, sorry, who was the seconder?
It was Ewing.
Oh, you got it, Dean?
Yeah, I said I moved it. Yeah.
And Alderman Pearce seconded. Have I got that right?
Correct.
Okay. Alderman Ewington, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, I think I'll just encourage everyone to support it. I think it speaks for itself.
Alderman Pearce?
On page 20, I think it is, it complies. So I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Other speakers? In that case, there's no need for a right of reply. Voting's open.
I think I've only got 11 there. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 12. That's unanimous.
Thank you. The motion is carried unanimously. 11.3.2 is a development application at 3 Miros Drive, Howrah, for 3 multiple dwellings. Moving a second, please.
I'll go again, Doug.
Alderman Ewington, thank you.
Alderman Chong.
Alderman Chong, thank you. Alderman Ewington, you wish to speak to this one?
Only the same as I said last time, that I encourage my fellow aldermen to support this sensible development.
Alderman Chong?
I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other speakers?
Alderman James, a question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Lovell. Mr. Lovell, on page 36, and I did raise this at the briefing on Friday, in the body corporate rules associated with this development to the satisfaction of council for the proper management of the stormwater treatment, etc., by the body corporate. As I mentioned, this is probably the first that I've been aware of, the fact that the body corporate rules have to be probably considered in order to satisfy council's requirements under stormwater treatment under the stormwater treatment facility. To what extent is the body corporate involved in this? Is it taken as being some form of communication, either orally or in written format, in order for that particular condition to be met as far as council's planning scheme is concerned?
Mr. Lovell. Are you there, Mr. Lovell? If you could unmute your mic.
Yeah, can you hear me? Through you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The reason we have that condition is because the drainage works will be within the common property, and it is important to ensure that each of the unit owners, in the event that the land is subject to a strata title, becomes responsible for their share of the maintenance of those civil works. It's in terms of those owners becoming aware of this requirement, that will occur when they purchase the properties, initially through the 337 certificate they obtained from the council, and it'll also be brought to their attention by the solicitors, and also in the drafting of the strata plan by the surveyor, which we will check before we seal the strata plan, so that that ensures that there is no dispute in the long term about how the drainage works are maintained by the owners concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell.
A supplementary, Mr. Lovell, it does say provision must be made in the body corporate rules. Does that come before or after the event?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The requirement will need to be demonstrated before council seals the plan of strata. So when the purchasers buy the lots, they will be aware of that imposition on them.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell.
Thank you.
Any other speakers? In that case, Alderman
Alderman
Newington.
Mulder, just like
Oh, sorry, Alderman Mulder.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I don't particularly like the idea that we're going to put 3 dwellings on what was once 1 dwelling, mainly because of the access issues. But of course, there's no way around that. But you've got an access out there that's very close to a traffic signal intersection between a highway and a fairly busy suburban street. So, you know, I'm just not overly fussed that this is the way to go with these sorts of things. But of course, there's nothing I can do about it. The access is what the access is.
Thanks, Alderman Mulder. Other speakers? Right, a reply, Alderman Newington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think we should just support. Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion before the chair is approval subject to conditions and advice. Voting's open.
Voting's complete, Mayor. That was carried with 1 abstention.
Okay, so the motion is carried, and that concludes our business as a planning authority. Moving on, there's nothing under customer service, asset management or financial management. Moving on to governance, and the sole item there is the COVID-19 Clarence City Council Community Support Package 11.7.1.
I'd like to foreshow an amended motion, Mr. Mayor, on that one.
Are you moving an alternative motion?
I am, Mr. Mayor. Something I circulated Saturday, I think we sent it out, where we discussed it at the briefing meeting on Friday.
Do we have a seconder for Alderman Newington's motion?
Yes, I'll second it.
Thank you, Alderman Pears. Alderman Newington, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's only a minor change to the original motion that was put forward, but I think a pretty important one. I mean, when we first sat down and had our first agenda meeting after the shutdowns and the severity of the situation hit us, the one thing that was consistent, well, I mean, I think from most of us, was that it's an opportunity for us to look at, you know, what our core and essential services are, and then the need for us to be able to look at that major issue as part of the whole debate about how we look after our residents and how we look after our businesses. Now, the original first part of the motion, which talks about basically placing a focus on the, getting back to the core and essential services, was in the preamble of this motion, but I thought it was important to put it at the front in the actual motion itself, because I think we really need to show the residents and the community that that's, a big part of what we've got to work through over the coming, weeks and months. Because, I mean, as we all know, and the community is probably aware of, is that, we're part of the way through setting our budget, and our ability to actually deliver on some of the things that are included in this motion in relation to a 0% increase in our rates and, some assistance to some people that are doing it tough. Has to be combined with, a careful look at some of the things that we actually spend our money on. And I mean, look, I think all bureaucracies at some stage need to have a good look at some of the things that they get involved in that may that when it gets a little bit tight with finances, we need to probably bring them back a little bit, and I think it's a chance to do that. But I mean, the real issue here for all of us is, you know, really making a decision on what we actually define as our core services and what we define as essential services. And I think it really gives us an opportunity as a council ourselves. It's something that we really haven't had a chance to discuss up to now, and I think it's important that we put that as part of this whole debate as well. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to argue in relation to the need to put our business continuity and recovery plan in place and authorise the general manager to do all that we need to keep the finances and keep the money flowing in relation to overdrafts and those sort of things. I don't think anyone's going to complain about you know, the hardship policies that we've implemented. And I think, you know, we all support the need to not increase the rates and to bring it back to you know, something that's more manageable for our community. And I think it really you know, and sitting on top of all of that is the need to really you know, tighten our belt, to be honest, and really make sure that we let the community know that we're looking at that carefully, and that we, as a group of you know, aldermen, are really committed to that. From the meeting that we had after the first workshop, I think that was a consistent message that came from, you know, pretty much everyone when they had a chance to say that. And I thought it was really important that we put that at the top of the motion itself. But look, I encourage. I'm pretty sure everyone's supportive of the intent and the content of the rest of the motion, and I encourage everyone to support this. You know, aspect that, you know, it was always as part of, you know, the original summary, but I think it was important to have it in the motion, and I encourage everyone to support it. And really, I mean, the work starts from now on in is you know, between all of us to sit down and work out what this actually means, because at the moment we haven't really defined anything, and that's really the challenge for all of us, to come up with something that we're comfortable with. And when we can't cut every program, and that's certainly not the intention here, but I think it's a good chance for us to look at, you know, where we're at and you know, make some important decisions.
Thank you. Alderman Pearce.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you couldn't say much more than what Alderman Ewington said. I mean, I thought that was fantastic. But I think we're letting the ratepayers know that, you know, those in hardship we are looking after. The business community, you know, we're looking after them too. And it's great work, I think, by our officers and the LGAT. I think what we're proposing here is fantastic. I really do. It's going to be a long time before Clarence really recovers. I think it's going to be a long time before Tasmania, Australia and the world recovers. So what we're doing a small part here, and I think, you know, we've just got to be careful how we treat for the next year at least.
Thanks, Alderman Pearce. Other speakers?
Alderman Warren.
Alderman Warren, I'll take first.
Thank you. Yes, I support the motion. We've discussed this and agree that I think most of us agree that this is the way forward. I have one slight concern over dot point 4 in part C in the original motion, which I think is now part C in Newington's revised motion, and that is the diversion of community grants to local business as well as to the community. I think we're going to really need to put the focus on mental health community building, and I acknowledge that there are a number of areas of support for local business, and I wouldn't like to see our community grants used for anything other than community grants, but I won't be voting against the motion for that reason. I'd just encourage our Community Grants Committee to bear that in mind.
Thank you very much, Alderman Warren. Any other speakers?
Oh, Alderman James, Mr Mayor.
Alderman James?
Yes, look, I think this has been a team effort, and I make the comment wisely and with the greatest of respect, because I know that by Alderman Ewington including those core services was really an important contribution to the motion, and also to everybody else has made a contribution to this, particularly in relation to dot point 6 in part B, adopt a 0% rate increase of the general rate, but then spelling out the rate cent in the dollar. And that, by the very nature of what's in the note in the paragraph below clarifies it, I believe, and that was another key contribution that was made by another member of council. And we go on, even Alderman Warren made that comment at our workshop in regards to the community grants. And I don't want to continue by naming other members of council, but every one of them, and even myself in a small way, has made a contribution to this, and it's sending a signal that the Clarence City Council is united, Mr Mayor, is taking the necessary difficult time that we're in. And I believe that once this is circulated through as the spokesperson of the council, which is yourself, Alderman Chipman, that the public within the city of Clarence will be well aware that we are doing our best to make sure that those people who are really in the hardship category, and I have very close friends and family who are in that situation, and will know that council, Clarence Council, is doing its bit in order to assist them and in the greater community. I will supporting this motion.
Thanks very much, Alderman James. Other speakers? Alderman Mulder. Sorry, Alderman Mulder, did you wish to speak? You've just come up on the screen, that's all.
Oh, no, I just switched my camera on. I do wish to speak, but I was hoping to hear some further contributions.
I'm happy to go.
Thanks, Alderman Edmonds.
Yep. Yeah, I support this. I think, like most businesses, there's pressure and expectations, legislated or not, that we should cut back. You know, we need to deliver our core services in a time of crisis. You know, they're the essentials, and we're obligated to make them a priority while managing a reduced budget to take, you know, pressure off the community. With this in mind, I just want to make some comments though. With this in mind, I think we should expect the same support for our staff as other businesses. I think we've all received some corro today about the JobKeeper payment, and I'll be asking a question about that in question time later on. But and I note the GM's comments at our last meeting in relation to a question of mine where I think there's some good support likely to be provided there. You know, we've got great staff. I think tonight's testimony to that, you know, and also our other remote meetings and all the sort of stuff that's swung into gear to make life for an alderman, frankly, very, very smooth transition in what could have been, you know, chaos. And, you know, that starts with the general manager and other senior managers, but it goes right through the organisation, you know. And when I came in to get my computer set up, you know, the service was fantastic. We've got fantastic staff. The whole point to JobKeeper is to let businesses keep a connection with their good people. Now, if we have to cut back and lose people, then we've lost that connection if that program's not offered to us. I don't understand what makes us different to other businesses in that sense. You know, we're doing our bit by freezing rates and other reductions in services, in foregoing revenue, in delaying revenue in terms of some of that we're doing to help people in hardship. So we're doing our bit. And I just think that we probably should be able to ask for a safety net for our workers while we do that. You know, I don't think that the federal state governments can ask or legislate us to tighten our belts and then put our workers in such a perilous position without the same support that other businesses are giving. So I'll ask a question about that later, but I wanted to put that on the record while we talk about a reduction in our revenue, which affects the services we provide, which I support in the current climate, and I think actually provides us an opportunity to get back to our core services. I think I'm in agreement with everyone on that. But I think in this sense, we've got pretty good people working for us who are having this shadow cast on them that other people in other workplaces are getting. Let me start that again. Our staff are being put under more duress than staff of another business, and they provide a pretty important service to our community. And I think we should lobby, and that's what I'm going to ask later, to get them covered under this program, because I don't think there's anything that makes them second class to employees of any other business in our city.
Thanks, Alderman Edmonds. Other speakers? I think, Alderman Mulder, you're going to have to, if you want to say a few words, now's the time.
All right, Mr. Mayor. I was waiting for a contribution that was foreshadowed on at the workshop at the agenda brief on Friday, because I think there are some points in that contribution which will probably be made anyway, but that probably need to be addressed. I concur with the others in relation to the hardship policy being applied. I think that's a very, very good basis. Also, the idea that the rate in the dollar is fixed rather than rates themselves, because that captures areas of, say, new houses that last year were rated at the land value, and this year will be rated at the improved value, so at the capital value. So I think that's a good move, because to do otherwise would be inequitous, and it's a good and a sensible and a just position to be starting from if we're going to freeze the rates, or should we say the rate of the rate. The other issue that I wanted to raise was the idea that somehow or other council is in a position to start pouring money into the electorate in the forms of improved and enhanced capital works, which aren't actually in here as part of this particular package. I'm sure there will be some as part of the Hobart City deal, but I don't think that we should be now out here throwing money out. And the reason I say that is state and federal governments have a fairly extensive taxation base with which they will be able to recover over time from the debt and the deficits that we are going to incur as a nation. Might I say that those taxes and rates, those taxes and charges will be taken from the same people who are our ratepayers. So they're already going to be doing the heavy lifting as we climb out of this mess. What I'm really trying to point out is that local government doesn't have those sorts of rating basis. And the only way we would possibly recover if we go too far down into the debt mire is massive increases in rates on the very people who are already facing increases in taxation and other matters. So I think we're in a slightly different position to the other two arms of state government, in that we can't do what they can, which is adjust the taxation according to the means of the taxpayer. We have a very blunt instrument called the rates, and we've heard time and time again about asset-rich, cash-poor people who have trouble meeting their rates demand because they happen to live in an expensive house that they probably inherited from their grandparents. So I think we are in a position where we cannot be going out there and putting the council into any unnecessary debt. There are other levels of government that are in a better position to make those contributions for a community-wide thing and have a better access to a more equitable taxation regime with which to fund them.
Thanks, Alderman Mulder. Any other speakers? If not, I'll call on Alderman Newington for right of reply.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, Mr. Mayor, if it's Brendan Blomley.
Yes, Alderman Blomley.
Yeah, sorry, I had a problem with my microphone then. Mr. Mayor, as you and other colleagues all know, I am exceedingly underwhelmed by this so-called community support package before us tonight. And while I'll vote in support of it, I'll do so as a down payment for future initiatives, which I hope this council will undertake. A down payment on what, as local government, could and should be doing for our community in this time of extreme hardship. Hardship, Mr. Mayor, that has not been seen since the Second World War. In my view, we have squibbed this opportunity, and I'm just so incredibly disappointed. The small target approach that has been adopted on this issue is far from adequate. At a time when commercial operators in our state are gearing up to write off hundreds of thousands of dollars to assist Tasmanians in our hour of need. Those many thousands in our city who have lost their jobs and are experiencing real hardship, we adopt the small target approach and give 3 months grace on their fourth rates instalment before we start whacking them with late payment fees. I mean, honestly, surely we can do better than this. Mr. Mayor, it is incumbent on us all as elected representatives of our community to play our part in assisting our community during this time of significant need. And I'm sure when the full financial impact of this pandemic hits, we would all like to be able to walk through the Rosny Park CBD and hand on heart, as we potentially look across a sea of vacant businesses, honestly say that we did all in our power to help. It is those small businesses that have helped make Clarence the wonderful place it is today. The good, hard-working operators of those businesses have worked hard, employed local people, have supported their families and paid their bills. In return, they ask for little. But now many of them are facing a humiliating end to years of hard work, their businesses in tatters, their staff laid off, and the sign on the front door saying closed. Mr. Mayor, they face an uncertain future, and if we don't do everything in our power to ensure they return, we will lose those businesses and with it, the people they employ and the other local businesses they support. This isn't about handouts. This is about ensuring that there are businesses there when this awful pandemic is over. This is about supporting those people in Clarence who have supported us over many years. It is about showing them that we as council understand their plight and we want them to return and we want to help them. Mr. Mayor, as I said in my opening remarks, although this package is far from adequate and I want to see more, a great deal more for our residents and ratepayers, I will support it on the condition that it is a down payment on more to come.
Thanks, Alderman Blomley. Other speakers?
Mr. Mayor. Yes, Mr. Mayor. I think I will now make a contribution.
Alderman Walker.
Thank you. Look, it is right to say this is the biggest challenge that our council's faced since World War II. I don't think that's at all melodramatic. It is profound and it has been rapid. And it'll be interesting to see how history judges us, how PhD students in the future look on how the local government sector in Tasmania responded and what they did. The bottom line is, much as I'd like this to be short and sharp, it may well end up that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Is this response perfect? No. And I do note the comments from Alderman Warren, Mr. Mayor, around the diversion, but I would note that within that community grant component, for example, that not-for-profits and community organisations do feature, and we have a role to make sure that their voices are heard with that little component. But, I mean, really, Alderman Ewington was right to talk about, the core focus, or focusing on the core, because this is a health crisis first and an economic crisis second, and actually many of the roles that local government play are the biggest public health roles there are in the community that do the far bigger uplift for long life than even hospitals do. We might not do water and sewage anymore. We're still in the vaccination space. We still need to get stormwater out. We need to be able to function to deliver these core services, because otherwise there can be an outbreak in some pretty horrible conditions if there are. I think that some of the knee-jerk responses that could have been followed up, had they done that, we would have bankrupted the council or taken it to the verge of that before even some of the announcements from the federal government. We thank the federal government for what they're doing with the JobKeeper and the job seeker payments that will help our community. If we had gone out early and hard before some of these things, we wouldn't be taking them back. We would have constrained ourselves for we don't know what's coming up ahead. We have to be judicious, we have to be strong, and it's the easiest thing in the world to be generous with other people's money, but we're entrusted with what money the ratepayers have provided to us, and we must be careful and we must be targeted with it. There's not a time for Corbyn capitalism or Seville rights socialism. We've got to be very careful in how we're doing things. And I think the majority of us are doing that. And I think the staff have been excellent in helping us along. But we must pace this as we go along, because we could bankrupt ourselves 150 times over, and still some of our businesses might not be able to survive. Some of my fellow aldermen are in an extremely challenged time. I'm lucky that my business is probably only down 40 or 50%. I have colleagues around this table who have put the close sign up. It is a tough time, but the dignity shown by our community, the dignity shown by some of our aldermen and our staff in this hard time is commendable. This is an appropriate, measured step that sets us on this path that we hope won't be a marathon, but may well be. I commend the motion.
Thank you, Alderman Walker. Other speakers?
Yes, Mr Mayor, once again, I will just go back to what I said weeks ago. A rapid response is the wrong response. As Alderman Walker has just said, then careful and targeted is the way to go. And I commend this motion.
Thanks, Alderman Kennedy. Any
Mr.
final
Mayor,
speakers?
Alderman Von Berto here.
Yes, Alderman Von Berto.
I'd like to reiterate what many of the aldermen have actually said. This is about supporting the community in the short term, but it's also looking at the support of the community into the long term, at least 10 years into the long term. So there's a balancing act that we have to undertake. As far as the alternative motion that Alderman Newington has put, and Part A, we are going to have an incredibly robust discussion in terms of what is seen as core services. That is going to be critical in terms of our budget for the coming year and into the future. I commend this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final speaker? In that case, Alderman Newington, right of reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and colleagues. Look, I appreciate the input from everyone. I think everyone's made some valid points. You know, I think the consistent thing there is that, yeah, look, I mean, the state and federal government are the ones with the big bucks out there to stimulate the economy. I mean, our role really is just to have a steady ship, deal with the things that we've got control over, and then look at how the stimulus packages pan out in the future. And we can always adjust the package moving forward. I mean, to suggest that we can waive rates and miss out on the revenue stream that we've got at the moment, you know, it just wouldn't be possible for us to do that moving forward and know that we can, you know, support the services and the staff that we've got in place at the moment. I mean, the one thing I would encourage all of us to do at some stage as part of our response to all of this is to look at the things that we have control over in relation to how we can support business and individuals within our community to bounce back as soon as possible, is to look at the planning and some of the over-regulation, which I know causes a lot of problems in the community. I mean, the fact that we've actually got to go and get a planning permit to make modifications to the Bellerive Beach Park.
Alderman Newington, if you could, Alderman Newington, if you could,
I hear you, that's fine.
Confine your comments to summing up, please.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, but look, I think there's other things that we can do to support the community and support businesses and everyone to move forward once the worst of the virus has hit. And I think, you know, we'll have plenty of opportunity to deal with that moving forward. But, you know, I think that, you know, there's plenty of good valid points made by everyone. I think, you know, it's certainly work in progress, and, you know, we've got a bit of work to do.
Thanks. The motion before the chair is as circulated by Alderman Newington, which has two modifications. Firstly, bringing the preamble paragraph into the motion itself, and secondly, deleting the proposed delegation to the General Manager to determine planning decisions. On that basis, there are a number of points to note, a number of approvals from Council and several authorisations to the GM. Voting's open.
That's unanimous, Mayor.
Thank you. I declare it carried unanimously, and I want to congratulate the Alderman on the quality of the debate and the process leading up to this very important decision. And move on now to item 12. There are no matters on notice. 12.3, there are answers to questions previously taken on notice, and I propose that we accept those taken as read. And so we move to questions without notice from Alderman, starting with Alderman Mulder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question relates to some confusion that's being caused out there, where some state government instrumentalities are closing some of their reserves, some of their beaches, but not all of them. And council's in a position of having to decide whether or not we follow suit. Now, it's quite clear from the Premier's announcements that he expects us to get out there and exercise. So I'm wondering if there's any way of getting some consistency and clarity, because if the idea is that you close a beach or a reserve because people might go there, we're almost in a situation where we'll have to close our footpaths because it's not possible to keep the 1.5 distance. So there's some confusion there, and I'm wondering if it's possible for you to take this up with the government and try to get some consistency across the board about when it is that you close a public area.
Thanks, Alderman Mulder. It's a pertinent point that has come to my notice through a number of complaints from members of the public, and we have taken it up. General Manager had a discussion at a fairly senior level in the bureaucracy. General Manager, could you comment on that as well, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The conversation I had related to closure of parks and beaches, as you're referring to, Alderman Mulder. Essentially, as I understand things, the Tasmanian government took a view that if they were closing parks and reserves, that was done on a complete basis and not with discretion in some areas and not others. So the areas that have been closed, for example, around Clifton Beach, are closed because those beaches are part of a nature reserve, whereas the areas that we have control over, we have our own discretion. As you suggest, we've taken a view that with the requirements related to minimising requirements related to social distancing and exercise, it's appropriate to leave those beaches and other areas open for that purpose unless it becomes untenable. So whilst I understand the Tasmanian government's position and their desire to have a clear message on some of their parks and reserves, we're in a position where we can take a more nuanced approach.
I'm not sure there's more we can say about Alderman Mulder, except we have taken it up. The government acknowledges the inconsistencies, but they're not prepared to do anything about it.
I'd just like to know the basis for closing those parks. Is it because if the underlying issue is social distancing, 1.5 metres, then there's no reason to close those sorts of facilities.
I take it as a rhetorical question, Alderman Mulder. And
what I'd like you to do is I'd like us to go back again and say, what's the rationale for closing these things? My question is would you do that for me, please?
Well, the Premier's already stated clearly that he doesn't want to review the situation. Of course, I can write again, but I have asked the question and he has given us the answer. Do you have a second question on a different topic?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Alderman Kennedy.
My question is probably just a soft one, which is kind of nice, to the General Manager, just asking really how our staff are coping at the moment, and especially those the staff that are out doing all the works in community spaces where they're kind of close to people and people are moving through. And I'm just, you know, a little concerned as to how they're coping in their day-to-day work.
Thank you, Alderman Kennedy. And through you, Mayor, look, it's been a fairly trying time for everyone, not just council employees, but everyone in the community. And like everyone else, we've had to adapt to an enormous amount of change in terms of the way we do our work. And that's affected people in quite different ways. You'll all be aware that we've decanted most staff from the council building and closed ourselves to walk-in customers, which is a very unusual environment to be working in. But people are rapidly getting used to working from home and teleconferencing and so forth. Within the context of the outdoor workforce, we obviously check in regularly across the organisation and in particular our outdoor workforce. We're very conscious and have managed to adapt to the social distancing requirements, but we've equally have seen the necessity of maintaining those services and those, and particularly things around construction and maintenance as an important part of maintaining the city and keeping things going with a sense of normality as much as that's possible. So that's our focus at the moment. Council staff across the board are very focused on continuing to do what we do in a business as usual way as far as that's possible, but just in a different way. Some staff who have less work than they did before are being encouraged and are taking up volunteering opportunities as well. So we're looking for other ways to actually help the community while remaining at work and keeping doing the things that are important to everyone in the city. So, yep, it's a difficult time, but we're trying to look for the opportunities where they exist and respond to those as quickly as we can. And I must say, across the board, it's been a magnificent effort. Several aldermen have made references to that tonight, and from my point of view, it's really important to acknowledge the amount of change that people have coped with, dealt with in good grace, and found solutions to problems. It's been a significant effort from everyone concerned, no matter where they are within the organisation. So thank you for your question.
And thank you for a wonderful answer.
Thank you. Alderman Newington. Do you have a question?
I do. Look, it fits in with Alderman Mulder's question about exercise. I just want to ask Ross Graham, that is, if we had what the date was to remove the pontoon, and second to that is, if it is going to be removed early, whether we can actually keep it a little bit longer if that's possible.
Mr. Graham.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no decision's been made on a date to remove the pontoon. We will review that. We would like to keep it there as long as possible to enable the public to use it, because it only did go in relatively shortly. But we'll undertake a review after Easter, and I'll inform the alderman as to what might be an appropriate timing to remove the pontoon.
Thank you.
And just on that as well, through you, Mr. Mayor, just to we are planning on leaving the other boys there and over winter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. We are going to, for this winter, leave the boys there and assess that and see how that goes.
And can I ask whether we get a buoy attached to the pontoon if we take it out, so there's another, so it maintains the 100 metres? If we can look at that.
Through Mr. Mayor, I think that would be automatic, so then we know where the anchor is down beneath.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Walker.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'll be like many others, a bit disappointed later this month that, you know, for the first time in my lifetime, the Anzac Day events and ceremonies that are held throughout our city won't be happening. I guess there's still opportunities for some perhaps more dynamic ways. I'm thinking of a particularly active digital church group, for example, that are sort of online with their congregations at the moment. In a roundabout way, if people can come to you or come to council with novel ways to perhaps conduct an Anzac Day service online, but within the current rules and regulations that we abide by, would some of the money allocated towards Anzac Day events still be able to be reallocated to such ideas?
We'd certainly look at that, but we wouldn't move ahead without doing so in partnership with an RSL sub-branch.
Sure.
Okay. Another question. Was there Alderman Walker?
No, I'll leave it at that.
Alderman Pearce.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, a question. Our public toilets are open, but I've got an email from a ratepayer that we've got no liquid soap in them. I wonder if we can trial, and I say trial, liquid soap. Now, the dispenser will probably need some protection, some metal protection around it, but I wonder if we can just trial it to see if it works, and maybe it goes in all our toilets eventually, our public toilets.
Mr. Graham.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a briefing will be coming out to Alderman very shortly in terms of advising on our public toilets, confirming just what I'm about to say in terms that all our 31 public toilets are open at present. Normally they do not have soap because of unwarranted behaviour that has happened when we have trialled this. We've done inquiries. We are unable to obtain soap dispensers and liquid soap right at present. So we have put soap bars in toilets as we could. We're undertaking further investigation and discussing with other councils as to what they've been able to obtain to see if we can actually put soap dispensers in at least our most highly used toilets. And I will inform the Alderman as we progress through this.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Did you have another question, Alderman Pearce?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Alderman Blomley.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Edmonds.
Yeah, just one which I foreshadowed in my comments on the earlier motion. Can the Mayor and General Manager urgently lobby members of the government ahead of Wednesday's sitting of Parliament to include our employees in the proposed JobKeeper program? I think I went over the reasons why, but it is very timely in terms of this as a decision being made on Wednesday.
General Manager, have you got any comment on that?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the question. There's been quite a significant union campaign on this issue over the last few days, and I'm not sure where other organisations are in terms of their position, but we've certainly considered ours in quite some detail. We haven't involved ourselves in the campaign because we see ourselves sitting in a somewhat vexed position that we can't, in good faith, go out and say that we need the JobKeeper allowance to support continued employment. At this point, we've got full employment, but there are certainly parts of the business that are going to become more sensitive over time. So, for example, with the change to support funding in relation to childcare and other childcare related services, that's changed the dynamic quite a lot, and we're investigating that at the moment. But I understand that there's also a lot of activity in the childcare area from local governments in other states dealing with that issue as well. So our problems are fairly small at the moment. We've got capacity to continue, and that's our intention. And in that circumstance, we think it's difficult for us to advocate for inclusion in the JobKeeper allowance. Having said that, if the situation radically changed, I would expect for LGAT and others to assist us very quickly to actually move an argument forward in seeking support.
If I can add to that, both LGAT and ALGA have been very, very active in that lobbying space. So there's not much more that we could add to the weight of local government as a sector already lobbying. Did you have another question?
No, just to make the comment that this is going to happen for a while, and perhaps, you know, a marker in the ground now about how we feel about this topic. I would encourage you to do it.
Okay, thank you. Noted. Alderman von Berto.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first question is, when is Council planning on commencing flu vaccinations for the public, and when and how will those details be communicated?
Perhaps if I could ask Mr. Toohey.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We'll commence our public vaccination program for flu on the 21st of April. We've only been able to order the vaccines from last Friday. We intend to publicise it on our website, Facebook page, and a general notice outside the council building. And hopefully, and the other important thing to mention is this time round we'll be doing it by appointment rather than people just turning up. So if people want to be vaccinated, those that are eligible, they'll be need to contact council, and that'll be made very clear.
Alderman von Berto, did you have another question?
Yes, I did, Mr. Mayor. Will there be any monitoring in the Clarence municipality of social distancing regarding the launching of boats during the period between the 8th and 27th of April, bearing in mind that many boat owners live and launch boats in Clarence, and therefore the state government ban announced today will not apply to these people?
Mr. Toohey, are you able to comment on that? I think the enforcement of those provisions is largely a test poll one, but Mr. Toohey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. While we don't have any direct or immediate head of power in terms of enforcement of the social distancing rules, what we could do to assist is maybe erect signage encouraging the correct behaviour in those places. And if there are particular areas that Alderman von Berto has pointed out, like boat ramps, we can alert the Tasmanian Police to that and ask them to take a more active role.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Alderman James.
Yes, two questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, graffiti removal from council buildings and other buildings where we have a partnership with the agency, etc. I understand this is done by volunteers. How is our volunteer group handling the pace, and also the number of volunteers that are actually working on those graffiti removal projects within the city?
Mr. Graham, are you able to assist us there?
I think that's actually a question for Mr. Toohey.
Mr. Toohey, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in response to graffiti removal from our buildings, if it needs to be removed urgently, we usually engage a contractor to do that. Where it's non-urgent, yes, our volunteers do assist with that. In terms of that, as far as I'm aware, there's been no change to that arrangement.
Do you have a second question, Alderman James?
Yes, indeed. I received a memorandum from Mr. Graham the other day regarding the security fence on the hilltop at the Anzac Park area. It was quite encouraging, Mr. Graham, and I would seek for that to be distributed, if that was okay with you, Mr. Chairman, to my colleagues, because it provided an up-to-date account of where we are with that. And in saying that, perhaps Mr. Graham could just outline, where we are, and I believe where we are nearly approaching a DA under delegation.
Thanks, Alderman James. I'll take that as a statement as opposed to a question.
I was hoping it'd be a question.
Well, yes. We'll make sure everyone gets a copy.
But the question, Mr. Mayor, was whether Mr. Graham could just give us an update on where we're at as to whether we are getting close to a DA.
Thanks, Alderman James. Mr. Graham, if we could have something in the weekly briefing report, please.
Do I take that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll follow through with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's yes. Alderman Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions. The first one, in light of informal feedback I've just received of the success of this format for meetings, I'm asking through you to the General Manager, can we consider some of the things that we're doing for the first time that we perhaps should continue doing after this crisis is over? Have a lot to learn.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Warren, you've suddenly become very distorted. I don't know if there's a problem with your mic or the internet connection, but the video is quite good. But perhaps you could try again, please. I copied the preamble to your question. Could you state the last part?
So my question is, can we learn from these new experiences and work out things that might be worth keeping even after the crisis is over?
General Manager.
I think the short answer is that would be a matter for discussion at a workshop with aldermen once we've got a few more of these under our belt, I think, and we know how to do it a bit better.
And I'd like to add to that it's something that I think we should consider taking to LGAT for one of their general meetings as a forum towards the state government.
Yes.
If I can maybe add to that, Mayor, to get to tonight in the way that we've had a huge amount of effort from quite a number of staff and a couple of our IT team in particular, who I won't name up on the record, but they know who they are. So to find the solutions, test them, work out the nuances has been an enormous effort to make this happen tonight. I'm sure it will get easier, but it's certainly something that we should talk about once we've got a better knowledge of what we're doing and how it works.
Thank you. And I pay tribute to those people, and I'm sure they appreciate knowing that their efforts have been rewarded by a very positive reaction from the public.
Did you have a second?
It's good to know.
Second question is a planning issue, and I thank the efforts that have been made to continue business as usual, even with the council chambers closed. I did just have one question about viewing plans, which people were able to come in and do, and the solution that has been provided is that you can now view them on the website. I know that doesn't suit people, and it isn't always an easy way to see plans. Is there an alternative that we can provide in some way that people would like to view the actual plans in large size rather than on the website, particularly for those constituents who are not particularly technologically savvy?
General Manager or Mr. Lovell?
Thank you. I'll answer first of all, and then maybe Mr. Lovell might like to add some more colour and movement. The notice that we received today from the government essentially authorised plans and DAs to be advertised and accessible via electronic means, or in the alternative, they could be posted to the individual person requesting. You've hit upon the very point that we need to give more thought to, is that what size is that and what's involved in sending those plans out. So we haven't yet had an opportunity to have a discussion about that, but it's certainly something that we plan to do over the next couple of days.
Good, thank you.
I'm not sure if Mr. Lovell wants to add anything to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Minister's direction also allows a request to be made for a hard copy via a telephone call to us, to the relevant officer, and that subject to the payment of the reproduction costs, then those plans may be provided as a pickup. Now, the problem with that is, of course, that many of the applications that we receive have copious amounts of documentation, so the cost to a person could be quite high. So that's unfortunately none of the solutions are as good as the previous arrangements where you could come in and see the plans at the office, but in any event, there are options available to people to get a hard copy.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the open session, and I'd like to thank the members of the public who've shared this meeting with us and had the patience to live through some of the little nuances as we've learned the new technology. With that, I'd like to invite a procedural motion to go into closed setting.
So moved, Mayor.
Thanks, Alderman Pearce.
I can second that.
Thank you, Alderman Edmonds, I think it was it? Being a procedural motion, voting's open.